All right, we got a great topic today. Multiple topics in the same area, which is interesting. And last week we had Coach D had a great guest on Montclair State head Coach Palazzo. Talked about a lot of stuff where how it affects the Division III world, and not just how he came up, but how a lot of these things affect the world that he's in. I think it's interesting. But today we're gonna kick it off talking with kind of like the hot topic of college football right now in the slow season, I guess, because spring ball's over. Is Jaden Rashada suing Billy Napier in Florida, um, and the collective. I can't think of the guy's name who was running the collective, but the collective and
It's pretty much the main collective for the University of Florida.
right. And the big backdrop of it all was to give the kind of backstory for people who don't know. Um, Jaden Rashada claims that he got a $9 million NIL deal from University of Miami. And I've heard it. I've heard it stated that a lot of people believe there was something definitely offered there very high at the University of
Oh yeah,
Miami.
oh yeah. That's what this whole that's
Uh,
what this whole kickoff thing is from, right? Like he's just salty about that aspect of it. But
then it,
he's a top kid, right? Like he's a top quarterback recruit. He originally signs with Miami for nine point
oh,
five
he didn't
million
sign.
promise or
So he
whatever.
didn't sign. He didn't sign
He
with Miami.
committed. He
He
committed to
committed to
Miami
Miami, and it committed to Miami. It
in June 2022.
got offered 14 million supposedly to go to University of Florida with like a $500,000 a commitment guarantee, I guess. Committed there and claims never got paid. Um, then he ends up going to Arizona State for
Right.
basically
Dad's alma
nothing.
mater.
Right.
His daddy's alma mater, right? Goes back there, plays the season, now
Now he's at
ends
Georgia.
up University of Georgia.
Right, which is also interesting because
Florida's
Florida,
rival, by the way, right? Like let me
right.
just add a little bit of that to it. So here we are,
So
right?
that's exactly right. So here we are, right? So, and the word is that obviously Kirby Smart or somebody had to grant him the hey, go
Yeah,
ahead and
he
sue
gave him
that
full
person.
blood. He's like, hey, if this is, apparently he approached Kirby Smart and said, Coach, this is kind of what I'm looking to do. This is kind of how I want to go about it. And Kirby Smart gave his blessing and said, all right, go do your thing, which adds another little piece to it. Like, it's just,
Yeah, because it's a recruiting thing, right? So there's a recruit. So without having to badmouth Florida, you are bad mouthing Florida, right? You're saying
100%.
that they're collective and what they're doing and what's going on there is essentially wrong, right? So if you're a recruit, and those are that's the big battleground for many years,
Absolutely.
Florida, Georgia, Alabama, right? So uh, those three right next to each other,
Yeah.
and
And in conference rivals, like the whole deal. But I think also you got to kind of look at it and set the precedence for who this kid kind of is too. Um, he was like the number 31. According to ESPN, right? He's a number 31 overall for the class of 23. Um, he's already going back to his freshman year of high school. He's already been a kid that's transferred to numerous schools, right?
right
So
three
he
times,
played his
right?
freshman year at Liberty High School in Brentwood, California. Then he transferred to IMG. Then he went back to California and played he finished his last 3 seasons in California, Pittsburgh High School in California. Then it came down to college wise, it was originally he verbaled to Miami, right? Florida comes in, gives a bigger NIL gig. So now he decommits from Miami, ends up with the Gators, contingent upon, right? And it says here, 4 years, $13.85 million deal from Florida. That's the issue at hand. Is he was supposed to get a chunk of that when he signed, and that never happened, right? So now he's suing for, the 9.5 million that he was supposed to get from Miami, because he's basically saying, because I said I was
Right.
going to go with Florida and I was going to take that more money, right? Now he's saying I could have had the Miami money, but now that didn't happen, so that's what I want in return for this. So that's kind of where we stand now, right? So
Right. So he regrets not taking the Miami, took the Florida. He really probably wanted to go to Miami, is what I'm
I
gathering
mean, look,
here.
you verbal in June of 22. You know what I'm saying? Way before you have to at all. Now, is it Miami? Was Miami the choice because Miami's the choice because they were going to give you that 9.5 million? Is that the reason? Like, you know what I mean?
Right.
I'm sure it had a lot to do with it, right? And then, obviously, oh, wait, now here comes Florida with a little bit more, money. And okay, now I'm going to take that. Bye bye, Miami. So it's just, this is the world we're living in at this point, right? And it's just, you look at a kid like already coming into that, like he's already been he's already not just transferred schools like within a state, right? Like he's gone from California to Florida, back to California
So
before he's even gotten into college.
now remember, he was also really in the that first year of the big things with the NIL where it was going
Right,
crazy. If you remember,
this is the first of the, you know what I mean, like
that
this
was
is
the
the
first.
first guys that started really, or at least that, was put out there, like this is what's going on, this is the money that these guys are actually like, you know what I'm saying. One of the
The
articles I
domino
read,
effect could happen here too, with like, so lawsuit wise, it could be lesser amount. Obviously, there's a big profile
now
case.
this has obviously been, now this has been in the news, not even so much about the suing and that, like this was an issue in terms of recruiting violations with Florida back, like when he left originally, right? Like there was something coming out, but then it had been kind of squashed by the NCAA and said, look, don't do your own internal like investigation at Florida. We'll handle it. We'll let you know
Mhm.
where it goes. But there was an injunction put on all of this stuff, right, by one of the courts.
Okay.
So it's kind of been in like a holding, you know what I mean, matter, where I don't think the NCAA was like, doing anything about it. So now obviously my man's getting a little stir crazy about like, where's my money? Or, hey, I need this money, which to me, I question, because you're at Georgia. So you're obviously getting some, you know what I mean? Yeah, I mean, maybe it's not 9.5 million, but you're at Georgia for a reason. And, to me, it's like now, because the NCAA was kicking its feet, now, I feel like they're saying, let me take this into our own hands and I'll move forward with this process. And if nothing else, like, because it says in all the articles, it says they've already asked for like a trial with a jury. Like they don't just want a judge to make a decision,
Right.
right? So they are already willing to be like, hey, we're going to take it to this level.
Yeah, because it's a
Um,
civil court case. So it's
Correct,
a court case
right?
where you sue in civil court. You don't want to judge. You want to hear a
You
jury.
want to,
Yeah.
absolutely. You don't
Uh,
want one person's opinion deciding whether or not you're getting this.
right. And I think that in a civil case, it's like it's like a majority. In a
Correct.
criminal case, everyone has to vote
Everybody, it has to be unanimous, right? Across the board.
unanimous. This could
In this
be
case, it could be
majority.
9-5, right? Or it could be
Right.
uh 5 votes to 6 votes, or whatever it may be,
Right.
right? So it's just, obviously it's in his favor to do it this way or go about it. Now, a lot of the things that I said, it's just, look, it's like, it's bad timing for Florida and all this. Like, I think eventually what'll come down, like, I don't think that there'll be any, like, from everything that I've read, like something's gonna happen, but it won't be what people are gonna be thinking about it, right? Like, it's not like it's gonna be this ruling and all of a sudden it's gonna be something that's, up in craziness. I think it's kind of just one of these things that's just going to kind of trickle, go away, and then
I don't know.
until the next
I
time.
think there might be more cases like this because we
I
don't
think that's
know.
what
We
this is
don't
going to do.
know. There
I
there
think
are
that's what
less
this is.
scholar like
This is going to create the pathway for other guys to come and now do this.
some
That's
guy
what
got
I think.
$50,000 offered. It doesn't have to be the
Domino
same
effect,
level.
right? Like
Right.
this
Like
is
this is
just
a
going to be a
big case.
domino. He's
Right.
just the first one to do it, and now you're going to
We'll see
have
what
guys coming out
happens,
of the
and then it
woodwork.
could be a domino. Absolutely. So, and then uh, uh the the agent. So here's the big part to me is that instead of having this was dad, I think, negotiating this, right, originally, which is where the issue lies
Somebody with
in.
the yes, which is because
Well, they're
even
stuck
in
in
a lot
that
of the
situation,
articles,
right? There's no agents. There's no like the NFL. There's no certified agents that are handling. Now, listen, you could get them, but obviously you're going to have to pay a commission to them. But there's no like in the NFL. You have these are certified agents for the
these
NFL.
are I'm
This
working
is
with
the
Drew
parameters.
Rosenhaus,
Yeah,
right?
this
Like I'm
is the
working
most
with
they can
this
take.
guy.
Right. So there's none of that. So you could have hire an agent, but you're gonna have to pay a commission if you're trying to save that. In my case, I always say this: you're saving pennies here. You think you're saving a lot of money, but
You're not.
you're saving
It's
pennies
costing you
to
in the long
get
run,
it.
but
It's costing you more money. Look at how much a headache this whole thing is going to be. So, but so they try to do it themselves and negotiate themselves instead of having somebody who definitely knows it. You know what I mean? And knows that
which is
world.
also interesting to talk about because I think if some of these agents or whatever, like you dive into this because eventually like that's what this is going to become, right? Like agents are going to become a part of
I think
college
they're on the
football more
sideline.
so than they are. So if you go into, I feel like if you're one of these guys that's maybe you're an up and comer, right, or like an agent or something, if you say, look, I'm going to handle only college guys, you could pretty much write your whatever because nobody else is going to dive into it like
There
that.
might be guys. I
If
think there
you're one
are
of the few
guys
guys that like
doing it.
handle the ins and the outs of this, like
It's a good
go.
question. There probably are guys,
I'm sure there are.
but I
But I
wonder.
mean, you're not going like, hey,
I,
this is
I
the
think.
Drew Rosenhaus of college football right
Well, I'm
now. You
saying
know what
the
I mean?
best guys, or well, the big names, maybe not the best, but the big name, they might be the best in some cases. But the big name agents are probably all sitting on
Absolutely.
the sidelines saying, "Let it flush out. We make enough
Yep.
money. When
Yep.
it flushes out, we'll dive in
Let's
and
go.
and we'll be able to get
But if you
make
think
sure."
they don't have teams of guys monitoring all of this or
Maybe
taking
they
in,
have
like,
guys,
like,
right,
hey, doing
representing.
this,
Maybe they have their runners representing. I don't know,
that's
but
what I'm
like,
saying. Like
because you don't need a
somebody's
license.
like in it. You know what I mean?
Well, see the thing. So here's the interesting thing about agent stuff. So besides the NFL, okay, this is when I was an NFL agent. Besides the NFL, there are states around the country. If you represent a player on their behalf in any capacity, you have to file with your agent license with that state and
Right.
pay a fee there. So these guys don't
Always
want to
there's always a
be per
fee.
se
Always a fee.
agents. So there's certain states, and I remember Texas being one of them. Like it was like $800. Okay, if you represent a player in Texas, you had to pay $800 to represent that player, right? So unless unless you're going to get deals for sure, right? It's hard for a independent agent who say, you know what, this is a great opportunity. I'm going to dive into NAL. I'm an NFL certified agent. I don't represent a big lot. I'm going to dive in here. But if you represent like a kid from some of the states where you have to pay, and I can't remember every state, but I want to say Florida was one you had to pay. Texas definitely was. But I don't remember it all because it's been a few years. But you did, like, I remember I was paying. Alabama was definitely one I had to pay. I represented a player out of Alabama. We had to pay the state. So in order to do business in that state as an agent, you have to be certified by the state too, and you have to pay that fee. So there's a lot of things that are going on. So that's why I was saying, like, it's really, really see the thing is the structure, right? The now the NCAA has their overall arching thing, but the individual colleges have to operate as a structure. And then the question is, well, football's over here. Like if you're an NFL team that, you're the New England Patriots, you're only worried about football. That whole organizational structure is based from ticketing to player personnel to coaches, all in football, right? But in the university, let's say the University of Florida, okay, you have football as one area, then you have basketball as another area, then who knows what there might be another sport that they have NIL deals in, maybe baseball, like in Florida, right? So they might be really good in baseball, so they need that as a separate entity, and maybe the rest of the sports are in another box, right? And it's like, track. There might be one guy they pay, but they can handle it all in one box, right?
Right.
But if you were like let's use Maryland as an example. You would have football as a box, basketball as a box, but you'd also have lacrosse probably as a box, right? Because you're a big time
Absolutely,
lacrosse.
because it's bigger there.
And UConn, you would say, okay, football is a box, but you have women's basketball, men's basketball as two boxes, right? That are their own world that probably have collectives it needed to be involved in some capacity. So there has to be a structure that starts to for the big sports individually with a parallel, just like you have in the NFL or a soccer organization. Liverpool, they have a GM, they have the coaching staff, right? They have the ticketing people. So that athletic department has to set up like multiple structures within the sport, like the individual sport would have, at the same time that they have to set up some of it also for other sports, maybe Olympic sports are all together. I don't know. But that has to be structured out. And without starting to do that, and I believe, and you can tell me I'm curious your opinion on this. So I believe, at least let's talk with football first, right? I believe that the football has to be completely separated out, meaning from a personnel standpoint with like a GM and everything. And not only does it have to be separated out, but that person, just like in the NFL, that person should not work for the coach. He should work for the athletic department. Okay, like the athletic department / university is quote unquote the owners, right? They're the owners, and in those multiple teams you have in football, you have the head coach, and then you have the GM. Now they work in parallel. Obviously, they're working with each other, just like in an organization. They work. There's crossover, but if I'm the GM and I report to the head coach only, and whatever the head coach wants me to do, I'm doing
it.
There's an issue, right? If I'm the GM and I'm reporting to the AD and I work in parallel, and I'm just talking, when I say GM, I'm saying GM, player personnel department, right? And we work in parallel, all right, to do the things we need to do. Two things happen. Number one, I think the coaches would be a lot happier. Number one, okay, with the current structure, okay, they would be a lot happier because they would have a better system communication-wise for recruiting. Think about it from what we do. When we want to put a player out there, do we talk to the offensive line coach? Do we talk to the person in player personnel? Do we talk to the guy in recruiting? There's 9,000 titles of people who nobody understands anything. Nobody knows who to communicate with. And yes, maybe the organization, as like a coaching staff, say, that's good. I don't want to talk to too many people. That might be true. And they're probably right. Okay. I don't want to have all my DMs open all the time. That's why you have the player personnel department to sift through that. And then they can send it over. Now, if someone has a relationship with
like which one, like, okay, this is something that you need to take care of, or you might want to look at this, like prioritize, right?
Because
like,
he's going to play for you.
Not dealing with like everything under the sun, which makes sense. I get it.
And in the NFL, this just from when I was an agent,
is part of it.
This is like, what would happen. So, like, if player personnel didn't really deem him good enough, you weren't going to get very far, right? But if they thought that he might be good enough, and let's say you had a relationship with a coach on the staff, and you said, hey, player personnel is probably going to put it on your lap. I just wanted to get in front of you, and you had a relationship with that's going to work. But there's a communication from both, because the coach would go say, hey, there's this kid. What do you think about him before I take a look at him? Even if I'm doing a favor to take a look at him, okay? Before I take a look at him, what's your opinion first? Then I'll take a look at him and say, okay, you know what? I think maybe you're wrong. I think he is good enough. Send it back, right? Versus the other 50 players. And I've had this happen in the NFL, right? Where I knew a coach on the staff, and I knew loosely some guys in player personnel. They had the film. They were maybe on the fence on a guy. I talked to the coach who I knew. They sent that film. They said, okay, I'm going to talk to personnel where they have him. Talks to him. If personnel flat out says he's not good enough, even if you have a relationship, you're probably not going to it's not going to happen. Okay.
Yeah, no,
So if
I
they
mean,
say,
look, you're
oh,
not
we
going to
like,
go unless you have an
he's a
outlier,
mini
right? But
camp
like for the
guy.
most part, that's
Yeah.
not going to happen. Like, this is what I pay these guys to do.
Right.
I get that you think it's something different, but you're that person. This is what they do. I'm going with them, right? Now, you could have like a Moneyball situation, right? Where guy just says, I don't care what any of you scouts say. I want this guy for this, right? But now you're talking totally different. Or a
But
head
there's
coach
still
that says,
communication
look,
there, right?
if Nick Saban says, I want this player, and player
He's going to take it.
personnel says, I don't think he's good enough, well, coach, well, guys, I appreciate it. It's noted, but we're taking this guy.
Absolutely.
Different.
But
That's not the norm.
It makes the structure better. Now, colleges are starting to do it, but what I've noticed is that it's fragmented. It shouldn't be confusing. Like, so from an NFL standpoint, if I called up and I said, John Smith, I have player Eric Smith, okay, and John Smith is the area scout. Let's say New Jersey. All right, his job is the area. He has these states, and his job is New Jersey. So they would have area scouts that would have university regions, and they would have positional scouts, right?
Yep.
So the area scout didn't always have a ton of pull, but he would be like, oh, I'll forward it on to the position scout. Okay.
Correct. So they can at least get the train started.
So not a position scout likes him or doesn't, whatever happens there, likes him, pushes it up to the next level, right? Or says to a coach, I need your opinion on this player.
What do you think about this guy?
I got 5 guys I like. They're all pretty good. Not a huge difference between them. They're not going to get drafted high. We know who the guy. This is going to be on the 53-man roster. This is going to be 48, 47, 45, something like that, right? Chance to be that. We got these 5 guys that can fit this. What do you think? Who do you like best? Okay, and that's that relationship. Now, what does that also do? Okay, it allows the coaches to open to their DMs to coach players that they want to. They don't have to. Okay. The personnel should all have their DMs open. Every one of them.
Every time.
Every single one of them.
At all times.
They're the filtering process. They shouldn't have their DMs closed. I know they don't like this, but that's your job. If yours says personnel and you're recruiting, your DM should be open. You should be spending 24 hours a day on that process with your whole team. I don't give a crap what you think about your time. That's your job. That helps the coach. The coach shouldn't have to go through every single thing all the time. Now, he may have players he wants to look at. He may look at the 24/7 or Rivals.com or any of those on 3 lists and say, okay, I know these guys are dudes. We already offered them. Okay, who's a guy comparable to them that I already like, But the whole communication part of everything is so bad. It's so bad in college football because the structure is bad. The structure, there's no if at Division 2 and Division 3, probably you should have one player personnel person, okay? And everything else is your normal structure, okay? That guy filters everything, but the coaches are still involved. D2 probably the same. FCS, you start to build a smaller version of the bigger structure, the GM structure. But at Division 1 and especially Power 5, you have to have that thing filled out. Some of them do, some of them don't. Some of them haven't really done well. Some of them don't. I don't understand the
right. I think that's an issue in itself right there.
Yeah.
Some do, some don't, some this, some that. Now look, that's a way to weed things out, right? Like, because if I have everything a certain way and it's up to the top, like I'm gonna get more than others, right? So but I feel like if you wanted to, like you said, every division is different, right? And it's the main problem to me is it's constantly changing, right? And you constantly have to change with it and keep updating and going and going. And you don't know what some of these parameters are, or somehow these other things. One guy does this, okay, well, I guess I'll do that, right? Or you see somebody doing something and successful, then you're going to jump on that. But you still have to put it in place. How can you not do something like that?
Yeah, I think they're backloading it and trying to figure it out. Probably calling for advice at certain areas, but the athletic directors probably haven't done it before. Okay, even though they're obviously seasoned athletic directors, and they're starting to probably consult with people, but they haven't done the almost all the coaches have not had that level of an NFL structure
Absolutely not.
unless
Plus,
they've
a
been
lot
in
of
the
this is
NFL.
like we said. A lot of this is unprecedented. Like it's never happened before, or this is how it's go. Like you know what I mean? I think everybody just needs to get there and like like there needs to be
They
an
got to get there fast
overall
because there's going to be
thing.
lawsuits. There's going to be
It's
more.
coming. It's coming. And like you said, like you're looking at this one right now, and because like this is pretty much come about because the NCAA has just been like, stirring and stirring and stirring and spinning
Doing
and spinning
nothing.
and spinning and not doing anything about it. So now a kid's gonna take it into his own hands and say, all right, well, I'm doing this.
I don't understand why the NCAA doesn't go and do this. Say, okay, listen, if you are an NFL certified agent, you do not have to take another licensing thing. You have to go through an education system of the rules of the NCAA. Basically, that's number one. You got to pass the rules of the NCAA like the coaches do, and then you're grandfathered in. If you're certified, if your thing's in good standing as an NFL agent, you're grandfathered in, so we can start to help these kids. Now you have to pass an NCAA test as far as what the rules are, because you don't want guys circumvent. There's obviously different rules, but you want them to know the rules. And once they know the rules, okay, what they can and can't do, you want at least to start out with the NFL agents representing players in the NIL. That's the first step. Like to me, then listen, you want to create your own version of that, like so for example, the CFL. So the CFL has its own agents. Okay, you have to pass their test. Now, you would circumvent it a lot because if you were an NFL agent, basically the CFL guys would they would do the deal with you, and you would kind of get like hey, he's an NFL agent, you know what I mean, like this is an NFL certified agent, I think you'd have to pay some fee and you're okay. But they had a different collective bargaining, right? So I've negotiated quite a few CFL contracts, but did I really know the ins and outs of the CFL? No, I knew the
Right.
NFL, and I knew it wasn't going to be as convoluted and structured as that is. But and their contracts were a little different because they weren't getting paid. They weren't getting paid that much. But they still had a contract structure, like a standard agreement. You could work some different things, but that's how I was. The NCAA could do that. They need to do that in some capacity. Whatever that capacity is, they have to start figuring that out. Because if they don't, it like this, it's already a mess.
It's gonna keep going, and it's only gonna get worse.
Listen, it doesn't kill basketball, okay? It doesn't kill men's and
This
women's
stuff is
basketball.
different when it comes to other sports. Football is its own. I mean, look,
Oh,
it's like when we talked to it's like when we talked to
killer
Adam
for
Bredeman. He
football.
said, "Look, you need somebody needs to take control of college football by itself. Like it's the biggest moneymaker. It's the largest in terms of majority of the things when it comes to NCAA sports. Somebody needs to be in control of it on the regular. Now, if like now we have this whole NIL and all this other kind of stuff that's going into it. Somebody needs to structure it. And look, I'm not saying I don't know how to do it. I don't know what to do. I don't know any of that. But at least let's start with putting somebody in charge. And then we can go from there, right? Because if now at least somebody's in charge, now we can kind of start to dial in what we need to really take a look at. But this is going to have to be a fast process because this stuff's already going and continuing, and by the time something gets put down in paper or concrete, it's going to be on to the next thing, or we're going to be on to the next issue. So I don't know how the heck you structure it or what you do with it, but you got to do something, because if you let it go like this, it's only going to get that much worse.
And I think you're going to have in 1A alone 3 levels. You're going to have 1A. I'm just using this. They call it BCS, whatever. But I like it's always easiest for me to understand the old way, which I actually thought was so easy to understand. 1A, which will be Ohio State, the big Big Four. Then one double A, which is really like the a group of 5 schools, and then one triple A is the old one double A, right? The FCS. That's one triple A, because there's 3 levels to it, right? There's really 3 levels to it, and that's the bigger issue. And then how can listen? I know people at some of these smaller conferences that have like one double A, okay, a
Yeah, well, now they're
football
calling it the what is it? It's like
FCS,
the core
FCS.
four, because it's not even a Power Five anymore. There's not even Power Five
It's
conference. Like,
not, yeah,
it's not
core
even
four.
5 of them anymore. So they're calling it like the Big Four. So now you're going, and look, conference structure is going to change the whole thing to begin with, right? Like you're already seeing that. Like the geographics of conferences being a certain way, that's long gone. You know what I mean? Like everybody's moving on to kind of go do their own thing. And remember, this is going to be the year of, like, you got Texas and Oklahoma going into the SEC. You got USC and all those other power guys. Like in USC and UCLA, I think, go to the Big Ten this year. Oregon and the other big dogs go in 2025. Like, this is happening. So conference realignment stuff, that's something else that people need to start taking a look at. Like, eventually, we may not even have, we may have 2 conferences.
Well, let's look at really small conferences in one double A, like the NEC and the MAC, right?
Ugh.
Well, how about the fact that the NEC lost Sacred Heart is now in the MAC, but not for football.
But football, they're independent.
Right. So is Merrimack is also now in the MAC. Left the NEC, went to the MAC, but they're independent in football, right? So the NEC's lost it, right? They're losing people. The MAC is who they swallowing, people from like a conference that's similar to theirs. So there's going to be issues in those smaller conferences, and there's a few of them throughout the South. You have the you got the MEAC, you got which is mostly historical black schools. You got out west where North Dakota State was in, and South Dakota State. Like, so there's going to be issues in those conferences as well, because they have a certain thing, but they can't collectively do the same things that even the group
Like
of
the
group
NEC
of
is
5 schools, like a
the
Georgia.
NEC is funny. The NEC is crazy to look at. Like, you look at like the NEC like that I'm looking at, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like now, like if you're talking just football, right? So we'll go back to like this here, the standings from last year. Duquesne,
Right.
right? You have Duquesne in
Power.
there. You have Stonehill, Merrimack, St. Francis, LIU, which is old CW Post, Wagner, Sacred Heart, who's leaving,
So is
and
Merrimack.
Central.
Right. So is Merrimack, right? So those 2 are leaving already. We know they lost Bryant the year before, right, to CAA.
Yep.
So
Monmouth's been gone for a while.
those
But I mean,
conferences,
you look at schools like
and then we'll
Merrimack.
talk about basketball, right? Because basketball is probably where those schools make money, because of if they get the NCAA berth, right, they get a win. They get 300,000 per win, right? So that pays for their like teams, and so you're talking like those conferences in football need no NIL money, probably, right? But in basketball, they need some NIL money, right? They need a couple of players in basketball that are good, because if they get a win, like they've got, like St. Peter's did a couple of years ago, and FDU did a couple of years ago, they get some wins, that changes the whole thing for their conference, right? So they're going to need something in NIL to get some decent players in there, so they can hold on to some guys. Because what happens as soon as St. Peter's, as soon as Shaheen Holloway leaves for Seton Hall, what happened to those St. Peter's players? They left, the good ones.
They all go with them.
Right. So they're left with nobody. So there's, you got like, and then what does that happen? Then they don't do next time. They don't get as many players. They don't have money to get those players. It's like this bad cycle. And that's just, that's taking like the lower level schools, because what do you do with them? But, at the higher level, communication is so bad in recruiting. Communication is so bad. Like when we talk about this, high school coaches are upset about it, right? The high school coaches are usually upset about recruiting to begin with, but they're upset about it in another level now because of communication. It's not, they're not asking to go and have a lunch with the coaches, okay, at the college level. They're not saying, hey, coach, I'd like to go to lunch too, if you're recruiting one of my players. What they're asking is, we'd like to know a little bit about what's going on, okay, with players you might or might not be recruiting, because there are ramifications on our program, okay? There are. Let's take a great player. You have a player that's Gatorade Player of the Year of TR North. I don't know whether he had an NIL deal or not. I have no idea. But let's say the coach has no idea if money's being given to a player. Okay, it doesn't matter what the money is, but it does help him understand what might be going on with the kid from day to day, right? When he sits in a room with him, hey, coach, just to let you know, like, he's done an NIL deal with you. I can't disclose what that is. That's fine, but he may be driving around something nice in school. You're right. So
I think that coaches at the lower levels want to stay as far away from NIL as they possibly can. Right.
right.
I think it's kind of one of those things that, like, I don't want, I mean, look, even, talking to Coach Palaz the other day, he's like, look, I haven't dealt with any of the NIL stuff. He goes, I'm sure it's going to happen. It's just a matter of time. He goes,
At
but
Montclair, really?
he's like, I'm literally, it's D3. Guys, if guys go into D3 thinking they're going to get some type of NIL money, you're out of your
That's
mind.
crazy. That to me,
You're in your own world thinking you're going to get something. Like, I was
yeah.
happy I got a pair of freaking sweatsuits. Like, I was
Well,
that's
does
what
he
we're
think that guys are going to ask for? I'm curious.
I think I don't know if it's like guys are going to ask. I mean, it's a conversation that at some point is going to be brought up, right? And they're going to have to be made aware. Like, look, NIL, it like that doesn't happen in D3. Maybe if you want to go whatever, but like this school is not going to sit here and have a collective for you, right? Like that's just not happening. I'd like to. I'm curious. I'd be curious to know like what they do with that stuff at like a Monmouth or a CAA school. Like, how do they handle that? Right? Because I think that's totally different.
and that's
I just see it the lower the level, you know what I mean? I
that's where the
think
JMU coach jumps Indiana. Let's be honest. Like,
well, I think guys understand that like I think players understand that the lower the level of school I'm going to, like I'm not looking like I'm definitely like I'm just looking for a scholarship. Like the NIL stuff comes when you're like that tier of a person, right?
right.
Like I don't think, guys that are, you know, FCS or Division 2 or Division 3, I don't think that's even on the table. I think it's like I'm just looking to get a scholarship.
Well, of course, sure. I mean, I think that's a big issue. I think too is like, then you get into collective bargaining, right? So do does it become a structure where making them employees in some capacity? Because right now, basically, they're their own business, right? NIL, as I originally understood it, was Reggie Bush is a great player. Instead of Reggie Bush having to get money under the table, okay, Reggie Bush, because he's selling jerseys and he can get a percentage of those jerseys, right? He can get a percentage of the university using his name, image, and likeness. So instead of him getting money under the table to buy a house, he actually makes enough money from the collective, from not from the collective, from the licensing, and he's able to work a deal. But the problem with the NIL was it was like, hey, okay, yeah, you could get a percentage of the jersey sales, but you got to negotiate your own deal. Who am I negotiating that deal with?
Correct.
So Fanatics? Who am I? I mean, who? I'm a person. Like and I'm using Reggie Bush example because when he was the big player at the time, I mean, he really was like the number one high school player in the country,
The man.
and he panned out. You know what I mean? It wasn't like he was the number one player in the country and didn't pan. He was the best player in the country and
Right.
was the best player in college. Like he was like slam dunk, right?
Right.
So on a national championship team as well. So, but that's like what was like. Let's say he had the ability to do it. I know everyone doesn't want the collective, which is pay for play, right? But who's negotiating his merchandising deal? His dad, his mom, a friend? Like, so without something
Uncle Bill
there.
who read a book or something, like, like.
And who's he going to? The university? Fanatics? Who
Right,
has the
because they're
license
gonna like
grant?
right, like you would now at that point I would think if like if you do
I
something
guess
with
it's
like a
like Fanatics
company like
now. Right.
Fanatics is like, hey, we're gonna send you so and so, he's gonna work with you, and
You're
then
yeah,
he's gonna talk to the university to make sure whatever we'll handle paying him. He's your guy, like you know what I mean? Like now that's a way that an outside company or a third party could kind of make the inroads and do some wellness kind of stuff and say,
they could.
now all of a sudden you're like Reggie Bush is like, hey man, I used so and so, they took care of everything, you know what I'm saying? Like, and now build a business like the other side. But it's really what it comes down to is this: you're taking amateur athletics and business, and now you're smashing them together, right? And now it's okay, what do we do? How do we handle this? And because there's never been any structure or it's never been done before, no, everybody at first it's like, hey, that's great. These guys are going to get to go to a card shop and sign an autograph on their jersey and make a couple bucks. Like, no, that's not what it's become, right? Like they in my eyes, they totally underestimated where this was going to go. And they totally weren't expecting it to explode as fast as it has. And now they're in a position like we can't stop it. Like, and now that we've made it public, like now they need to figure out how to regulate it. Okay. And I don't know how that's done. I don't know where you go with it. I think you take a group of people and take them and let's figure this out. Take the coaches. Hey, what do you think should be done? Take administrators. What do you think should be done? People that, you know, aren't involved in football that are marketing people. What has to be done? Like, take the GMs in the NFL and be like, hey, why don't you have a conversation with that? Right? Call up your GM buddies and say, hey, how do you guys do it in the league? Because this is how we're going to structure it here, which is, I think you can see the Ohio States of the world, the Georgias of the world, the Bamas of the world. These higher level guys or higher level programs are putting those structures in place
It's
where
at
you're
least starting
seeing,
to, right.
right, like you're starting to see now, well, that's our marketing department. This is our collective department. These guys handle the money. Like, you know what I mean? Like,
And then how do you compete if you're so let's use
if you're
Indiana.
UAB, what
You
do you
are
do?
well, yeah, I think of maybe a better example is
University of Buffalo, what do you do?
well, who
Like,
who's like who's a weaker team in like the Big Ten or something like
Indiana,
Indiana. Indiana. Right. Indiana. Tons of basketball money.
Northwestern.
Tons of basketball money. But what what do they do and how do they compete without becoming doorknobs in the end of the whole situation, right? And then you're right, UABs of the world. So UAB cannot
What if,
eventually.
what if
How
you're,
are they going to play?
what if you're North Texas? Like,
Those teams eventually are going to be. I started reading. It was your recommendation. I started reading it, and I'm only on the
even,
second
even,
chapter, the one on How Mummy, the book with How Mummy that you really liked. What's the book that you really liked with How Mummy about the passing game and it eventually gets a Michael Leach? It's like called how you've talked about it. The greatest play or
oh, pay to,
it
was
was
it the
about
one Tony told us about?
how mummies rise. Did you read it or was Tony that told us about it? It was
Might have
about
been Tony.
it was about the rise of the air raid. So anyway, I'm 2 chapters in. What was really interesting was this. Now this is way back when, right? There was haves and have-nots, but um, he was at West Texas as a coordinator, as a very young coordinator, Hal Mumme. And then the guy who was the head coach of West Texas took the job at UTEP, who's always terrible, right? And he talked about how UTEP had now it was a big pay raise at the time, but they had nothing. They had no West Texas in Division II. They were actually winning games because they were comparable.
Yeah,
But
he was at West Texas A&M and then made the switch to UTEP.
oh, is that what? Okay, so UTEP they were not able to compete, and they're not even in a big conference, but they were not able to compete. Didn't have the resources. This is before obviously any of this stuff. They didn't have the resources, and they lost loads and loads of games. Okay, and every once in a while you have someone win at UTEP, and what does he do immediately? He leaves, right? Because they don't have the resource.
Yeah,
Well,
no, Mummy got his break when he left and went to Iowa Wesleyan, right? And like that's when it really kind of took off. But you're right. Like look at like Larry Coker, right? Leads Miami to a national championship. Yeah, with coaches. He was there from the holdover from Butch Davis and whatnot. But wins a national championship. Then what? He goes and takes a job at University of Texas San Antonio, right? Like, is that going to match up to exactly the same? Absolutely not, dude. Like, I don't know. I feel like that's what's going to happen, and that's why I think something needs to be done immediately. Like, it doesn't matter what you might be one of the best, recruiters or people or this or that, like in the coaching in the whole country. But if you can't get that NIL collective money together to pay players to come to your school, dude, there's not going to be a lot of guys that are going to want to go and do that. Like, not when Alabama's throwing them this much money, or Colorado's throwing this much money. Like, you look at Texas A&M, this much money. Tennessee, like people where there's boosters and all this stuff. And that's, I think, the issue now is, right? Because now you have all this money in an NIL collective, right? What's stopping me from saying, hey, come be a PWO, but I will pay you through the collective, right? So now you're pseudo, right? Like rosters have PWOs, like real PWOs that are paying their own way, not on scholarship. But this school over here has 10 PWOs, but pretty much they're all on scholarship, right? Because they're getting paid that full boat through the NIL. How do you
absolutely.
police that? Because why wouldn't you do that? Like, hey, dude, we're gonna call it a PWO, but you're getting this, so it offsets. You're fine. Like,
There's no doubt about it. It's the kind of thing where there's no the end, whatever the football organization that ends up has to structure, and there's got to be a. I don't know that there should be. I don't think there should be a union or a collective bargaining agreement, but there should be agents involved. If you're going to have NIL the way it is, if you're going to pay employees, there should be whoever the organization is should have parameters of how you structure the employee agreements, right? Because there's a lot of things in play. Then you also going to have Title IX issues, which you and I are not experts in, but you would have Title IX issues, right? Because if you're doing this football, then there's going to be something going. I just don't know enough about it, but there's going to be a structure with respect to Title IX. You'd have to have a title. My dog's in there. Really like.
I mean, look, you saw a lot of this stuff. Like, you saw stuff starting to come out now with like just how women's basketball in the last 2 years have really kind of turned it up a little bit now. And
Park,
then now there's a whole bunch of like going on with that type of stuff in terms of, well, how come this one gets that and this one doesn't get this and this is that and this is all this other stuff, and this one makes this but this one
well, if
gets
you
helped
made
out by
football its own
that. Like,
entity, right? So what if you structure? You said football has its own GM, blah blah blah, which you're starting to do, but then let's say you have a
why
good
don't we
women's
have
basketball.
ours, or what are we going to do with it, right?
Is it
It's
a
like,
Title IX issue? Is it or isn't it? We don't know. Do you have to mirror that organization throughout the female sports, right? Or I guess calling yourself female now sports.
That's another issue on top of that. You have the trans world. Like, that's a thing too. Like, and if you think it's not, it is, because it's just part of what we're dealing with. How do you deal with that? Right? Like, that's
A
an
whole
issue. It
nother.
is what it is. I don't freaking know. Like, this stuff is all going to come about. Somebody needs to look. University have already started to go to like, all right, you're the athletic director, but you're in charge of football, basketball, baseball, whatever. Okay, you're the assistant athletic director. You're in charge of this sport, that sport, that sport, where it's broken down, right? So within universities, maybe they need to do so. Okay, your NIL collective. Okay, this is the overall, but this one is football. Okay, this is right. Women's basketball. This is men's basketball. Or do you just say, hey, look, here's the NIL collectives. You're in charge of it. Make sure each team gets. And then you kind of have people under you that you're women's basketball, you're men's basketball. You can structure it any way you want, but it needs to be in place. The guy who's handling all the NIL collectives shouldn't be a football guy directly. That's to me, I don't think that's fair, and it's not very good optics in terms of a university itself, right?
I don't know that it is like they probably have a sports assignment for each in the collective because for example, LSU, the girl athletes, some of
Plus,
them are
if
the highest
you're,
paid.
I'm trying to like, if you're an LSU booster in general, like, are you an LSU unit? Like, are you the university booster? Like, you just want money to go wherever? No, you're gonna donate money, and I want it to go to football. Damn it! Like, that's where it needs to go. So,
Right.
is that a separate collective in terms? Now you're dealing with that. Like, hey, I donated money. I want it to go to football. Like, what do you mean you used it for women's basketball? Like, that's not what I'm talking about. So that's where I think everybody should have their own little like figurehead or pinpoint or like main person contact point, right, for what needs to be done. Or are our collectives set up like boards, right? Like, do you have a bunch of people that are kind of running the whole thing in general? And hey, how far does it take that? If I'm donating money, then I want to say, hey, I want you to use this money for that kid. How much longer is that? When does that come about?
Absolutely. That's a huge
Like,
deal.
hey, or then you have what, parents that are going to go to people with money and say, hey, donate to this so that you're basically paying my kids tuition. Like,
Right.
there is a lot of behind the scenes stuff that can be done, that's probably been happening for years and years and years. But now that we've made this something more public and legal, now it's going to start to come out, and people are going to start to see, like, this is, yeah, these are the lengths that people will go to get their kid onto a team or to get into a school or just in general to have their college football team be good or school in general, any sport really. It's just, we always talk about football because that's the biggest one, the biggest moneymaker.
Yeah, it's by far. They've got to figure out a better solution for it. And we've talked about it. And then the collective bargaining. What happened? Who's an employee? Doesn't like? Do you need to start having employees? What goes on there if that's the case? Setting up the overall structure, and then payment, like payment wise. So this Jaden Rashard thing, like obviously at the beginning, the thing that people were throwing
He
out
was
numbers.
expecting to get a deposit into his account once that thing was signed. Like, send? Like, come on, man. Like, come on, dad. Like,
I who knows what the like exact truth is in the whole situation, and
and
it's
you'll never
very.
know. And I think Matt Rule said this at Nebraska when they asked him about this, right? And he talked about, because it's not public, like, I don't know, right? A kid could come to me and say, hey, coach, like, such and such a school is going to offer me, 5 million to come play. Okay. We don't, and that, hey, sorry, buddy, we don't think you're worth 5 million, but, go get it. Hopefully you do, right? So now
Right.
you cut ties. Then you see that kid goes and only signs somewhere for 3 million. Well, now like the kid kind of bullshitted you, or the guy that's handling it bullshitted you. Well, hey, we're not going to work with that again, Whereas in the NFL, everything is on paper. So we know, hey, we offered this guy, like, okay, they did offer him 5 mil, right? You know what I mean? Like, now it's just easier to like, now you're working with these people that
You
are
know
all on
what
the
other
same
issue you
page.
have? I didn't think about this. So we offer, let's say we offer 10 guys at a position, but we're only taking four or five, 3 or 4. Well, if we offer of all those guys a NAL deal, right? So the 10 guys, we want these 10 guys to come to our school. Okay, only 4 of them are going to come. Whoever's first commitment, I offer them all NAL. Let's say I offer them all 100K, like but basically the first 4 that commit to me take it. 4 guys choose it. There's 6 guys that say 4 guys say I'm coming to XYZ University. 6 guys had an NIL deal offered to them, hadn't made a decision yet. Okay, they end up losing. They end up losing that NIL deal. Don't get anything else. Scholarship gets pulled. Do they then, if they had an agreement on paper, you're going to have something that says in place like you can do this or you can do that, but if this person commits, your NIL deal's void, null and void. You know what I'm
Well, I
saying?
think that's
That's
what
that's another
I
issue
think that's what the issue is with this
with
with
Chata.
with Rashada, is there was nothing on paper that said you're tied to this or linked to this whatsoever, so that now when whatever went awry, it could just break, and the ties, they could just break and be gone, and nothing, and no ramifications happen.
Well,
So
I
I
think,
think that's
yeah.
part of the issue in turn here, right? Like, so they're just trying to say, like, look, this was never in place. Like, this wasn't, if this might have been verbally agreed on, but there was nothing ever signed, done, deal, whatever. So I think that's kind of how they're playing it, both sides as well, right? So you're going to have to put things on paper. Like, that's just part of it. And as an athlete, I don't care if you know nothing about this business. Like, nothing is firm and final until I sign something.
Agreed, and that's, you're gonna obviously have to have agreements. Like a text message is see. So if you look it up,
Exactly, and that's what it's
but if
what
you
this
look
is
it up,
mainly about. It's like, oh, the
I bet
text
you if you
message
look it
chain
up though, even though
doesn't
it's not
matter.
an agree, like, in the old days, in some states, you could, if I write it on a napkin, that's an agreement. Okay, if I shake your hand in some states, that's an agreement. I don't know what the rules with text messaging state by state, but like, I wouldn't be surprised if you if a bona fide offer is put out there and it was like taken away, there may be some level of implication. I just don't know. Obviously, lawyers would know that better than me, but I think that that's a big deal. And then I just think communication. You're right. One of the accusations is that Billy Napier was involved in the
And
in
like, this was a deal with the booster. Billy Napier, the only thing he did was like, okay, yeah, that's gonna happen. Like, he just basically, that's basically from everything that I've
that's
read,
put him in a
right?
bad spot. Right, they put him in
Put
a
him in
bad.
a bad spot. Like, I have to vouch for this collective, and then he did, and now it did that. They didn't follow through. So now here you are. If you're what's his name's dad, you're texting the coach like, "What's the deal? This is supposed to be happening." It's almost like blue chips. Like, I don't want to talk to Happy, right? Like, I don't want to know how you do it. I don't know want to know whatever. Like, coach, the less you know, the better. I'll take care of it. Like, and now you've gone and done something wrong, and then you got the one kid going, hey, coach, if I quit the team, is my mom going to lose her house and job? It's like, I don't know anything about a house and job. You know what I mean? Like, that's over there. Same type of situation where he vouched for him. Now I'm suing you too. You told me he was good. Now it's not good. Where's my money?
It's a big. It's a big deal. It's a great discussion.
And it says, even like it says, like, like, it's involving third party participation in NIL related activities. Yeah, this is what this whole thing is going to come down to, is how good are those, you know what I mean, collectives set up with the right people doing it the right way, so that none of this can come back and hurt our program, right? Because at the end of the day, not only did it hurt our program in terms of a kid doing this or coming like a player himself, but like, even now, extra little fu, right?
Yeah.
Like,
No.
otherwise he could just go over and stay on the West Coast, and I'll never have to hear from him again. But no, now he's gonna burn this thing to the ground. Like, don't go to Florida. They promised me this. This is what
Right.
happened. This is what now what. But come on, man.
It's unbelievable. Great discussion. I mean, it's amazing we were able to talk an hour.
But I can't believe this is like like, this
It
is
is a
what we're
thing.
talking about. Like,
Well, this is what we're talking. This is how it is. I
this
mean,
is college football, dude. Like, this is college football.
the
This
only
is
person
what
that got
it's.
bored of
This
this
is.
conversation was, I think, my dog. He's probably taking a shit somewhere. So,
I just think, I think, like you said, I think this is the first of more to come.
yeah, I mean, and I remember when that deal came out of the whole. Remember this? Like, I was
It
like,
was shady to begin with.
it was like, why was someone paying so much more money for him than any other player? You know, but
It said
it
Napier promised the player's father a $1 million partial payment upon signing, Rashada never got that money, and the boosters never fulfilled the deal. That's what's
Oh,
said
that's
in
right,
the
because he actually
lawsuit.
did sign. Now, like, that's right, he signed there
Now,
too.
Rashada is the first college athlete known to sue his coach or a booster due to a dispute over an NIL deal. So, like, it's like, how did we get here? Okay, well, it gives his whole background story. The Gator Collective, which is the collective that's involved here, right? They're an independent fundraising organization that distributes money to UF athletes. So, not just football, athletes in general, right? And it's However, the financial backing did not materialize, and the Gator Collective terminated the contract. Um, he was released from his letter of intent, and then he took a visit to Arizona State, and ultimately decided to play there for the year. And then after the season, right, like he plays for an entire year at Arizona State. Then he enters the transfer portal, and now he's at Georgia with 4 years to go.
Interesting.
I just
To be continued. To be continued. We definitely next week I think we'll have a Texas football coach on, so we'll talk some of that stuff there because I can only imagine what it's like in Texas.
Right, where everything's a Division I program and everybody's competing against each other for players in this, and like where even the small schools, I'm sure, are trying to, like, you know what I mean? Sam Houston's of the state, right? Like, or of the world, right? Like, you know what I mean? Like, trickle down guys. But like I said, I think at those lower levels, it's just, I don't think this is such a big gig, right? And I also feel like I hope that the way the NIL stuff and all the money and all that kind of stuff, I hope this is kind of just like an initial, like, wow effect where it's so much is being reported on or concentrated on, like, that stuff, that I hope as like things come about, it kind of trickles down and like we go back to not that being the thing we're talking about, that 24/7 Sports is posting what each kid's NIL evaluation is, or
I
On
think,
Three talks about this, or all
and
this.
that's so inaccurate.
Like,
How inaccurate is
they're
that?
just, listen, and like I said, we can't
What
even
are they just
figure
throwing it
out,
up against a wall?
just like, hey, if this
He's
guy's
worth
getting this and he's
100K.
in that, like, let's just tell him
Now
it's
a kid
this.
thinks
It's
he's
like,
worth 100K and he's worth a 2K, which is beyond all belief. Oh, the odd three says I'm worth 100K, dude. That's like some guy like with a dartboard. He's like, yeah, John Smith, 100K. He's got 8 offers.
I think it's crazy,
Stupid.
and like that's the other thing too. Like, and I think, like, you can tell me I'm crazy or not, but with NCAA football coming out, I think this stuff all matters too. Like, now these guys are like, hey, I want to be in the fucking game. Like, wait, guys are actually saying, like, wait, you're only paying me $600 because EA Sports is paying each player $600 plus a free copy of the game to use their name, image, and likeness in the game. And guys are like, you're only paying me 600. Now I think about myself. I said, shit, you're gonna give me a free copy of the game. That's all I need. These guys are like pissed. Like, you're EA Sports. I should be getting more. Well, $600, dude, times every dude in Division I football. Are you fucking crazy? Like, this is just the start of it, man. Like, what happens when this guy's like, oh, they put 3 certain guys on the cover, right? Like, guy from Colorado, guy from Texas, guy from shit. Where was the other one? Bama. I think maybe Alabama. 1, 2, 3. Right? Like, when do I get paid for that? Or how much more are you going to give me from doing that? Like, I'm the face of EA Sports.
That's so, yeah. So let's say there's 10,000 football players in college football. That's that's let's see, 6 times. So that's $60 million. So just paying in payouts.
Now, look, I mean,
that's a lot of money.
They're gonna make a shit ton of money off the game, right? They've already said that they released, like, there's gonna be 3 levels of you can get, right? Like,
Maybe
one
that's
level,
6
if you
million.
pay extra, you can get the release of the game 2 days early. You know what I'm saying? Like, this is gonna be a whole fucking, there's a whole new cult. Like, and don't get me wrong, I might actually buy a gaming system
6
just to
million.
be able to play this again, dude. Because I love this game. It was the greatest game ever. And you knew number 15 on the Gators was Tim Tebow in the game. Just, it just was what it is. But
So it's 6 million in payouts. Okay, at just
damn,
10,000, right? I don't know. I mean, there might be more than 10,000 in college football. I don't know how many there tickets. There's 2,500 each year. It's 10,000 is probably around it right now.
Michigan guy, Texas guy, Colorado guy on the cover. Quinn Evers, right?
If you're on the cover, you should get more.
What's his name from
Did he
Colorado?
get more if you're on the cover? Did he get
Hunter's
more?
on the cover. Hunter, it's Ewers, Hunter, and Edwards from Michigan.
Did he get more if they're on the cover?
I would hope so, dude. I'm the face of this damn game.
I better get at least 50 grand.
I would hope. You better give me more than just a free copy of the damn game.
I can't. Hopefully, college football is good because that used to be my favorite game.
Oh, Dave, I'm telling you, some of the stuff I've seen come out, it's like freaking awesome. Obviously, like all the stuff that they have, like whatever. But I mean, what's his name? Fowler and Herb Street, like they've been all in on this forever. Fowler's been like documenting as he's done it. He literally has done so many voice recordings for so many like things that could happen in a game with his voice. It also like they do something where if it's like a more of a higher level game, right? Like it's a bigger game within it, like the season itself, like different people announce the game for you. Like it's crazy, dude. Like it's gonna be like on a whole different level. Like I'm excited. I haven't played a video game in freaking 13 years.
That used to be the greatest game. I used to love coming out and running triple option
all the time, dude. Right? Like you had Desmond Howard on the cover one year. You have what's his name from Michigan on the cover, and I wonder if that's going to be a thing, right? Like the Madden curse, like don't be on the NCAA cover.
Well, anyway, we'll end the stream here. It's a great stream.
All right,
we got to do this every once in a while because it's real topics.
Well, it's like a State of the Union. Like we need to just like, hey, like we got to let everybody know kind of this is the new things that are going on right now, and like get prepared because here it comes.
Absolutely. All right. Until next week. Hopefully next week we'll have a Texas.
Everybody enjoy your Memorial Day.
Have a great Memorial Day weekend.